Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Getting to Third Space is produced by Tenacious Change, a consultancy committed to creating resilient, nonprofit organizations. This podcast is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom, be sure to subscribe to hear about new episodes when they become available. Also, be sure to share this podcast with friends, colleagues, and family. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society.
Hey, Lamar, how's it going?
Hey, Tom, doing well.
Excellent, excellent. So, hey, what's been happening in your world this weekend?
You know, it's been a nice last 7 days here in the center of the country. The weather has been nice, a little bit of rain, not much, but that exhaustive heat has kind of moved away for a while anyway. And for the first time last week, I was able to have a campfire on my deck in a solo stove, so it didn't burn the deck down at all. It's built for that, but it was really...
I'm so happy to hear
nice.
that.
Yeah, it was one of those spur of the moments like, oh, let's do this. The stars are out, the sun's setting. Let's go ahead and fire up the stove. So we had a great time, and then had the kids over and grandkids over, and we just sat back and relaxed a bit.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, we were actually supposed to travel to New York last weekend, and we couldn't. As fate would have it, our dog. I know this is weird, but our dog got sick. And it was one of those kinds of sicknesses that dogs experience that is quite unpleasant if you are trying to travel with them.
Yeah, I got you.
Because you kind of need to be near the outside, that kind of thing. So we unfortunately had to cancel that trip. And but then here comes the tropical storm, Ophelia.
Ah, yes.
And actually, it turned out to be very fortuitous, because otherwise we'd have been in the midst of that tropical storm all the way up to New York and back over the weekend. So we were kind of breathing a sigh of relief, and I shouldn't say we were glad that Ebenezer was not feeling well. We weren't glad about that, but we did feel relieved that we didn't have to be out in that weather. So that's how things are with us. We just kind of hung out at home.
Oh, good. I kind of gave you a bit of time to sit back and did watch some of the football. You and I are both Iowa fans, and we were disappointed in the Penn State-Iowa game, but that's the way the chips fall sometimes. But our pro teams seem to do pretty well. Your Packers did pretty well.
Yeah, they did. They did well. And of course, I live halfway between Baltimore and D.C., so the people out here that may be listening to this are not going to be happy to know that I still follow the Packers, but that's how it goes. So,
well, our Chiefs they showed up for the game and with Chicago, and they pretty much handled that game well. So, yeah, all in all, the sports experience was good for us. The weather's good. I'm getting ready to hopefully haul some corn for a friend of mine here in the next couple of days, and ready to go.
Well, keep your hand near that air horn, man. Let it rip, right?
So, I will. One just for you.
Yeah.
So, Tom, one of the things that we're just experiencing with this podcast, for those who are joining us, we're getting some feedback, and that's really a good thing. And the more feedback we can get, the better. So please feel free to send us an email. If you at the end of the show, you'll see those addresses, and let us know what your thoughts are. But one of the listeners, in response to our first show, sent a quote from Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky, who's a linguist, is quoted in this email from this listener. It says, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. That gives people the sense that there is free thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limit put on the range of the debate." So it's a bit of a you think you're actually engaging and having good conversation. We're talking a lot about conversation on this podcast, but because of the limits set, not much is really changing or taking place.
So let me see if I got this right. What Noam Chomsky is saying, essentially, is that you can create the illusion of having a substantive conversation in such a way so that conversation can actually be limited. So to acceptable topics or acceptable processes or whatever. And so the end result is that you don't actually have a substantive conversation. Is that right?
That's the way that I would interpret this as well. And if we believe that a substantive conversation leads to the next level or to some sort of actionable activity, that's going to not be the case when it's limited.
Very good. And wow. And I join you in expressing appreciation for the person who phoned that into us or emailed that into us, either way. But that's a really great quote, and that's a good one for us to keep hanging around and keep before us, because one of the things that we certainly don't want to do is to do that same thing, limit the spectrum of the conversation, because the both the joy and the risk of conversation is that allows you to go into places that you might not otherwise be able to go, in a way that is safe and respectful and allows you to really experience some interaction in a third space. Have you ever been a part of the kind of conversation that is described here?
I have. In fact, as I was reading it for the very first time, I had these memories coming back to me, and even maybe feeling a little bit of guilt that I may have inadvertently set up such a situation. Back in my HR world, saying, okay, we want to get the voices around the table. We want to be able to have conversation. Or back in some of the other conversations that I've been part of, invited to, where our voices wanted to be heard, but there really wasn't a way to operationalize or to put into practice or to take our thoughts or our voices and effect change.
Yeah.
So you walk away feeling like, man, I said a lot of things, but I don't think I really felt like it made a bit of difference.
Yeah. I've my mind's been racing here a little bit, because I've been thinking about different times when I have been guilty of setting up those kinds of conversations, and I have been in those kinds of conversations and walked out of them feeling so completely frustrated, because many times the minute you walk out of them, that's when the reality hits you and you say, I'm not sure that was worth my time.
Right.
I tried to give some honest feedback there. I tried to provide some substance in that, but I got a feeling I wasn't really asked the questions that they needed answers to, or that they should have been wanting answers to. Yeah.
So this may be reflective of a lot of kinds of conversations that people have had, or that we observe even nationally in political arenas, and also may be part of why people are choosing not to participate in meaningful conversations or dialogue.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that,
yeah, go ahead.
Our friends at Pew did some really interesting research, and they came up with this finding that they published on the 19th of September, that basically said that 65% of Americans feel exhausted thinking about politics. And I can somehow relate. I can relate to that. It exhausts me too. And what about you? Does that speak to you, Lamar?
I'm not sure I would have used the word exhausted for me more than the word frustration, because I think we talked about this last time. Are there good things that can come out of conversations? And I think that there are, but yet politics recently seems to be about setting up an us against them, setting up the outcome before even the event happens or the conversations happen or the meetings happen. Um, and unfortunately, you can check me on this about what your experiences or your thoughts, but unfortunately, it seems like that's a model that a lot of us are experiencing outside of the political world. Is that coming into meetings or coming into dialogues that have a real purpose? It's like the lines are already drawn or the outcome's already decided, or there really isn't a lot of interest in listening and changing and coming to a conclusion that all parties can agree to. It seems like the cards are already played.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question about this research. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that so many people have dismal views of national politics in the U.S.? And let me clarify what I mean by dismal on this. Another piece of the research from Pew says that only 4% of U.S. adults say the political system is working extremely or very well. And they say that 6 in 10 Americans have very little confidence at all in the future of the U.S. political system. And so what I'm wondering is it a good thing or a bad thing that so many people have dismal views like these?
So my initial response is, I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's an unhealthy position to be in. And while I think good critical thinking is important, and being able to identify issues and problems is important, when you get to that level of, in my book, of feeling things are dismal, you get to very close to feeling apathetic and powerless and unable to evoke change. And to me, when you get to that point in our political lives or in our communities in the world where we try to make a difference, we stop making a difference or stop trying to make a difference. That worries me. If there's that kind of a negative view of the world around us in the political world. So I don't think it's a healthy thing. What about you? What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to be a contrarian on that one today.
Okay.
And that is that I can't help but think it's a good thing. And the reason I say that is that I think that it propels us closer to fixing it. Now, hang with me on this. This how I'm going to illustrate this. And I realize that this may be a wee bit of a stretch, but we'll give it a try anyway. So the article says people get exhausted when they are thinking about politics. Now, that reminds me of something that people in 12-step groups like AA and NA often say when they explain why they decided to finally face their addiction. They'll say something like, I got sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And if Americans are getting exhausted of feeling exhausted, then we are closer to getting off of our collective backsides and doing something about it. Now, and I can't help but think that that's a good thing. It's like when we finally have had enough, when we've had enough of feeling the way we do, feeling frustrated, feeling hopeless, feeling exhausted, that we can't even watch political shows anymore, then maybe what we'll do is we'll actually get up and begin to initiate some positive change.
So you're thinking there's a certain amount of energy that comes into play when you get to that point, that energy is going to propel us to say we're going to make change. Yeah,
I am,
okay.
And I think, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That there is a sense that I'm so fed up with it. I'm so done with it. I can't avoid it, I mean, every news station I turn on, every TV show I turn on. I mean, out here right now, we've got political ads all over the place because elections are coming up in Virginia, and we're in the D.C., Virginia, Maryland, television market, and we've got all these things coming at us in the way of ads. You just cannot escape it. And so, if there, does that mean that at a point that where you just really can't escape it, and you feel almost hopeless that you can do anything about it, that maybe that's the point at which you finally say enough is enough, and you stand up and you do something about it. And you go ahead.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that perspective, and I think that's probably what's been behind a lot of major changes in countries and in organizations, even where people have said, we've had enough, we're going to come together, we're going to do something. The key, though, is you're coming together, you're pulling together, and you're moving forward. And I would embrace that. My concern is that it appears anyway, from working with people, working with large groups of people, when people feel powerless, and we get to that point of they're no longer stimulated even by the conversation, they're tired of it, it's a hopeless situation, that they begin looking for other things or other places to put their energies, that they abandon kind of the cause, so to speak. Mm-hmm. What is it? So let me ask you this question. What is it you think that would keep people rallying back to the cause to take the reins again and make change, to get reinvested into the process, given that they're tired of it? It's not. I don't want that to be a setup question. I'm truly wondering, how do you make that curve when it seems like a lot of the experience that I've had and seen has been people tend to just get disinterested?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. That it's very easy when you feel like you don't have any power in the situation, and you're feeling very frustrated, to really turn your attention elsewhere, or just check out altogether. Maybe you just find another cause, you find another thing that you feel like you have any control over. I think that's a really valid point. I think that the hope may lie in something that I have believed for a very long time, that if we can give people places for meaningful participation, if somehow our leaders, whether at the county level, the city level, the state level, or the national level, if they can find it within themselves to create spaces of meaningful participation for people, that tends to then activate this sense of ownership. What I think is missing is that people feel exhausted because they have lost any sense of ownership, that it is their city, their county, their state, their country, their society. And so if there can be if our leaders would be willing to share some ownership of all of this and extend that in a genuine way to people, I think that could be really helpful. Now, I have to tell you, there's something about what I've said earlier that just scares me to death, though. And that I'm not talking about people going out and taking up arms. I'm not talking about people staging revolution. I mean, we have seen that kind of thing happen fairly recently in our history, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is going back to the basic principles of how we create a movement. Perhaps even using civil disobedience, to make a point and to try to draw attention to some of the issues that are just beyond the pale for us anymore.
Tom, I think you talked a little bit ago about if our leaders would provide these opportunities. And while I think that that's going to be key. And by the way, I'm a big believer that leadership is not something that you are given, and it's not something
Right.
that is position
Right.
defined. It's really about wherever that person with those qualifications, those qualities, and interests can be anywhere in that, from the ground roots all the way out. A leader
Right.
can emerge. So, what is it? Why would someone now, with these kinds of data that we're referring to, why would they even want to get into politics or into a situation where the apathy or the dismal feelings or the negativity is so high? I mean, we see people bailing all the time in the political arena nationally, even locally, like at school board levels. What would drive someone now to get into, to step into that arena?
Well, before I'm going to tread water for a second while I think about that. But I want to go back to something you said, because I very much agree with your perspective about what constitutes leadership. Leadership is not a position. It's not a title. It's not even, you can be, I don't care if you're elected to it, you can still be not a leader, right? I mean, you may have the title, but not actually function or practice as a leader. Anybody can be a leader. And so the most peaceful way for things to happen is for those that have the position of leader would open the doors to others to have meaningful roles of participation in leadership. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that we the people can't exercise leadership and do some things to try to change the system. In fact, we should. Always peacefully, always non-violently, but that's what we should do. And it begins with voting, obviously, but it may go beyond voting as well, to taking some other kinds of civic action to try to change things. Okay, so I just want to come back and loop back to you on that and just say, yeah, I really agree with that, and I appreciate you bringing that out. So why would anybody want to be in politics?
Yeah.
Okay. So my inner cynic is coming out. For me, I think eventually it always boils down to power. I'm not saying that's why they initially go in. I'm saying that at some point, that's what it seems to be all about. I think people go in to politics to do good. And what happens is they realize they can do well and they can hold power. And after a while, that becomes the most critical issue, is I'm doing well. I've got gold bars. I've got cash in my under my mattress. And I've got power. And I don't want to give that up. And so I'll put up with a lot of crap. I'll put up with a lot of stuff, simply because I want to continue to do well and have power. And now I realize that is really highly cynical of me.
I would agree that is cynical, and I'm not. That's not. That's not saying you're a cynical person. I know you better than that, but it is a cynical position that is held by, I think, a lot of people. It truly is, and it's obvious that power and dollars, managing dollars, is something that there are those. That's what they want to do. I do firmly agree that there are people who get into politics for the right reasons, and maybe even stay into politics for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I know a number of local politicians, and I really appreciate the fact that they step in and they put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
But what concerns me is you're really opening yourself up these days.
Yeah,
I mean,
you are.
The way the people are challenged, It's not just any longer about your thoughts or ideas. It's now about your relationships. It's about mistakes you might have made in the past. It's about your family. It's about what your brother might have done over here or your sister over. I mean, it becomes very, very personal and takes a huge toll on people.
Yeah.
And so, it would take somebody who really wants to rise above that and is willing to take the shots, which was a sad commentary.
But when we were preparing for this show, we talked about another question, and that is that do people really want to get into politics to affect positive change?
Yeah.
And laying aside my inner cynic or curmudgeon, I go back and forth from being a cynic to being a curmudgeon. Laying that aside, I think there are people that really do go into politics because they want to affect positive change. And I think it is a problem with the system that either beats them down until they can't do it anymore and they finally leave, or they find a way to game the system, and in doing that, whether they ever intended to or not, they find that now they're hooked and they can't get out. They're hooked by the power, they're hooked by the prestige, they're hooked by the status, they're hooked by the money, and now they can't get out. And they're just being pulled down. I know age has become a really big issue in politics, right?
It has, yeah.
And it's like, I don't understand why, if you are a senator from our home state of Iowa and you're 88 years old, you want to stay a senator. I don't get that. I'm not near 88 years old, but I got to tell you, my body 10 years ago sure felt a whole lot younger than it does today.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't I don't want to ascribe bad intention on his part. But surely going back and kicking your feet up on your farm in Iowa and relaxing has to be a lot more appealing than coming to Washington on a regular basis and having to deal with what he has to deal with. I don't quite get it, especially at age, and I believe he's 88, if I remember correctly.
Well, we've kind of taken this topic and kind of looked at it from 2 or 3 different angles. I'm not sure that I have come to this point of saying, yeah, it's a good thing, or that it's a positive thing that people are feeling dismal about the state of affairs with politics. But I think it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
But I think maybe where we both did come to agree upon was it's really a function of leadership, and it's also a function of motivation of the rest of us to participate in some way.
Yeah. I would agree.
It might be good for us, Tom, at this point to just kind of sit back a little bit and say, okay, what did we just do? Part of this program, this podcast, is talking about how do you create a third space that's safe, to talk about things that are where you're opposing views or you're not necessarily on the same page. What do you think? Did we do that today, or did I call you a cynic and that really bothered you? I mean, how did we do today?
Well, no, I called myself a cynic.
Well, that's true.
And you just agreed with me. So
okay, that's fair.
No, to me, it felt very good to have this conversation with you. Very comfortable to have this conversation. And honestly, I could probably argue the point either way, that it's a bad thing or a good thing. Okay. But at least in this moment today, I'm feeling like sometimes you got to hit this bottom before you get back up. And I found myself wondering if this research is perhaps suggesting to us that at some level we're hitting a bottom, finally hitting a bottom, and we're saying enough is enough and we need to begin to pull ourselves out of it. I really, really hope that's what it's saying.
And I can definitely appreciate that and agree with that. I also think that when not everybody rebounds when they hit the bottom.
No.
And I think that there's casualties along the way. And I think all of that together paints a complex picture, but probably the data that they're presenting is worthy of us taking into account. So,
Well, and it's worthy. We're going to put the link up in the show notes,
yeah.
and it's worthy of our listeners, all 2 or 3 out there so far.
Okay. There's a few more than that, but hey.
Yeah. I'm just joking. There's few more than that, but it's worthy of our listeners to open that link and take a closer look at this, because I think it says something about this space that we're in right now as a country. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So, our goal to go ahead.
Well, you know what? The other thing you were asking how I feel about this. I feel really good. The thing that we always run into when we have a conversation like this is that there's a risk, and the risk is that we have to change in some way. And I'm not sure that either of us have changed in any way through this conversation, but it is a risk. Although we have changed a little bit because we have heard each other's rationale. We have heard each other's explanation for it, and it has informed our own understanding. And so that in itself is change, right?
Absolutely. And, we talked a little bit about football at the beginning of the podcast. And one of the things that happens a lot when there's a mistake or when someone sees an advantage, they take advantage of that and they pound that weakness, or they pound that something that I think you have to not have a part of a good dialogue or good conversations where you don't take advantage of somebody. You don't keep identifying where someone may not have the strongest argument and keep going that direction. It's really about you trying to learn. You're trying to listen. You want to be able to articulate your position and see where this goes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you and I will have multiple conversations in the future about this. I
really like that point, though. I just want to put a point on that, because I think that's really excellent. You can't have a decent conversation or dialogue, a third space dialogue, if you identify a weakness and you immediately drill into it.
Yeah.
No way.
Right.
Yeah.
We have been ending our podcast with some interesting information. You want to go there?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got a couple. We're going to introduce something a little bit different this week too. So we're gonna give a couple stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious things, but then we're going to give one that is a lot more positive too. So mine is a very bipartisan one, Lamar. We have a Republican in Colorado that was seen in a theater watching Beetlejuice, the musical, engaged in some highly inappropriate public activities. And at the same time, we have a Democrat who's running for the state legislature. Do they call it the legislature in Virginia? Who it was found out was making amateur pornography with her husband and posting it to the web. And now, okay, so here's a Republican, here's a Democrat. They're both engaged in pretty highly inappropriate public behavior. What do they have in common? I think what they have in common that gets them this designation this week is, did these public figures really think nobody would notice? Really? I mean, seriously. So that's my stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious for this week. You got one?
I can certainly get behind saying, I would agree with you. So I ran across this news item that just kind of took me by surprise from Gymnastics Ireland. There was a gymnastic event with a bunch of very young female gymnasts, and they all got a participation award, which is great. And I was watching the video where the person who's bestowing the award was putting around each girl's neck. A photographer come up, take a picture, put it around the neck. They were all standing in a log line, and there was one gymnast. They were probably in the 10-year-old category. One gymnast who was black, and everyone else was not. And when they came right up to her, the the person bestowing the award skipped her and went right to the next and on. And the photographer stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do, leaned in and talked to her, and then went along with the other person. It was a very obvious miss. Now, Gymnastics Ireland says, well, it was a miss. It was not intended. But when you have all these children in front of all these people bestowing these awards, that kind of a miss is a big deal. And what was even a bigger deal, it took almost, since March of 2022 till now to correct this publicly.
18 months?
18 months to correct it publicly. They corrected it on the spot by giving it to her before she left the event, but definitely not, when everyone else was receiving theirs. Now, I have no information that would suggest there was anything specific discussed or planned or any kind of way of managing this with the team, the authorities, the family. But it's just one of those things. It's like, guys, this was a huge miss. It took you this long to publicly address it. It definitely deflated, the competitiveness and ego of a young girl who really was there competing with everybody else. And it's too bad. Yeah. I think that's worthy of this award.
Yes, I would agree. Stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious. We give them to our person in Colorado, our person in Virginia, and to Olympics Ireland, right? Or Gymnastics Ireland.
Gymnastics Ireland. However, you have brought something else to the table.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know if I can get through this one, Lamar. I mean, this is like a kudos, right? I mean, this is not stupid, callous, fracking, idiotic, and obnoxious. This is like kudos, and the kudos goes to the city of Ingersoll, Ontario. And so it turns out that there was a farm couple that sold their property on the farm, and they moved into town. But they had this elderly goat named Bob that they brought with them, and I'm assuming that's because Bob was elderly, right? And what are you going to do? He can't go to a goat nursing home or a retirement center or something like that. So they brought Bob with him, and they built him a shed in the back that has air conditioning and heat and a salt lick and stuff like that. But there is a statute or a bylaw in the city bylaws that you can't have animals like that being kept in town. But the neighbors really enjoy Bob and seeing this old goat.
What is there about Bob?
Bob. What about Bob? Oh my goodness. They enjoy seeing Bob out on his walks with his owners, Albert and Yoka Higgendorn are their names. And the city of Ingersoll has not yet, given them any grief about having this old goat in their home and on their property. Bob the goat. So kudos to Ingersoll, Ontario. I mean, they could have really created a controversy here with the Higgendorns, but they didn't. And, all we can say to Bob, the elderly goat, is, Bob, live long and prosper.
All right, Tom. I appreciate you bringing this one to the forefront. And, you got to say that you just got to be there for the old goats.
Yeah, including us. So, folks, come on in. All right. Hey, all right. Lamar, as always, good to see you.
Yeah, great talking with you, Tom.
We'll see you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to be sure you get notices about new episodes. Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom is a production of Tenacious Change. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus. And we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today so you can check them out for yourself. Until next time, keep moving toward third space.